That's all right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for turning up to the Natural Heritage Funding workshop for today. Hopefully there's going to be some good learnings and some good input of the hard work the staff have put in for today's workshop. So I'll let Patrick introduce everybody, that's all the staff in the room, and we can make a start. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. I'll just start us off with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Te mā kenekene ki puta, te mā taratara ki tai. Kia hau aki ana ki a te kura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei Māori ora.
I'll just put Greg's apology. He's hopefully going to be here later, but he had to be at another meeting this morning. So Greg will be here for late. Yeah, thank you.
Coffee's all round. Thanks very much. Look, by way of introductions, we've got Nikki Ismay and Andrew Thomas are going to be doing the main presenting for you. We also have Katie Pepper and Jacob Dexter. If you know, sitting in, and also if we've got any other detailed questions, and Therese Velvet. Welcome back to Council, Therese. Thanks, guys, for coming along. So this workshop, as we've kind of discussed, is intended to provide a bit of an overview of the Natural Heritage Fund, the history, purpose, eligibility and criteria and assessment process, and the role of ICMC. So real background stuff and a chance to discuss all of that. And it's a precursor to the formal meeting we have on the 25th of February, where we'll be making, well, you guys will be making decisions around the NHF funding round for 24-25. Now, for this workshop, there won't be any information on the specific applications to this funding round. This information will be provided in the reports for the 25th. So while staff are happy to ask questions around the procedures they've undertaken and the policies that we've used, because we are unable to talk about the applicants for this funding round or any of the information they've provided us at this point. You'll get all those papers and the background information in plenty of time for the 25th. So we've already received quite a number of questions relating to the previous EIF and Natural Heritage funding rounds. Now the team are more than happy to talk to any of those questions today, and you know, they know much more than I do about it, which is good. But we will be providing a bit more of a summary information again for that to help you with the meeting for the 25th. So if we can't answer anything today, we'll provide it well in advance for that meeting. Right, with that, I think we can hand it over to the.
Welcome to get up with that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you guys are asked questions or anything, please come up to the table.
You can walk, even if you want to come up now, there's spare seats. Come up and join us if you're welcome to join us.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. So I'm just going to run through the presentation. If you've got any questions, there will be plenty of time to have questions and discussions at the end. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with many aspects of the Natural Heritage Partnership Program, but just to reiterate that the program comprises of 3 separate funds. So we've got our largest, the Natural Heritage Fund, our medium-sized fund, the Environmental Initiatives Fund, and the smallest, which is our small-scale community fund. And those 3 funds collectively make up the Natural Heritage Partnership Program. So The discussion today is around the Natural Heritage Fund, and as Patrick said, it's really to provide you with some background, some information around the procedures that staff have undertaken for this round to receive applications and assess it, and also your role in the decision-making process on the 25th of February. So the partnership program is guided by a funding policy, and that supports the management and operation of the program. And staff also have operational guidelines which we work to for the distribution of the funds. The policy itself was reviewed and updated and approved by Council in April of 2024, and the policy has been provided as an attachment in the report that you received. It's a working document, so we undertake to review it at least every 3 years, but because it has been recently updated and we're constantly assessing our processes and how well the policy is meeting the needs of the community. So we are very happy to be reviewing that at any stage with your input. Next slide, thanks. So the natural heritage rate, as you'll all be aware, was increased through the LTP process from $5.80 to $15 per property per annum in 2024, and that generates about 2.9 million in revenue per annum. The targeted rate was designed to allow unspent funds to be put into a reserve, and the total budget for each year comprises of that rate revenue plus any previous year's closing reserve balance. Just to note that the targeted rate supports the Natural Heritage Fund and the Environmental Initiatives Fund, and the Small Scale Community Initiative Fund actually comes out of another targeted rate. So the Natural Heritage Fund takes 80%, or 80% is distributed by the Natural Heritage Fund under the terms of the policy, and 20% goes to the Environmental Initiatives Fund. Important to note that staff time spent administering the NHF and the EIF is drawn from that targeted rate, and so it reduces the amount accordingly. Next slide, thanks. So just a bit of an overview about the fund itself. It was established in 2005, and it was designed to support community-led collaborative projects. Now, under the terms of the policy from 2024 until 2027, the emphasis and focus is on long-term landscape scale ecological projects. And whilst the policy is able to support land purchases, that's not a priority over the next 3 years for the fund. Once again, that's as part of the policy. Grants start at 40,000, so community groups can apply for anything upwards of 40,000, and the maximum could be the total annual funding pool. So effectively, there's no maximum beyond that. And applicants can apply for anything between 1 and 4 year projects. So as per the information that we provided at the 19th of September ICMC meeting last year, the 2024-25 Natural Heritage Fund has been run as a contestable fund. Next slide, thanks. In terms of the assessment process, there's a wide range of organisations that are eligible for funding. They need to be a legal entity, and they have to have a track record that satisfies council. There are some that are ineligible, and that is all outlined in the policy, but just to note that central and local governments are ineligible, Crown research institutes, and organisations based outside of New Zealand. As I mentioned, for the period 24 to 27, priority is going to be given to projects that achieve landscape scale outcomes, or those that link multiple smaller biodiversity projects that will therefore achieve landscape scale outcomes. There are some costs that are not eligible for funding via the Natural Heritage Fund, Once again, those are outlined in the policy, but just to give you an example, items like capital expenditure or projects that are designed to generate personal or commercial benefit would be excluded. Next slide. So in terms of this particular round, the fund was open for 4 weeks. It opened on the 7th of October and closed on the 1st of November. And each application was self-assessed initially by applicants. So we had 6 eligibility criteria, and the applicants had to do a self-check, and that was based around the policy. If they self-assessed as eligible, then they could go on to complete the full application form and submit an application. And then when the applications closed on the 1st of November, we had 2 internal and 1 external assessor that verified that self-assessment. And if they were eligible, if they were deemed eligible, then they got through to stage 2 of the assessment process. Next slide. Can we just go back one, Jordan? Okay. So, sorry. So in terms of the assessment criteria, each application was scored against 6 assessment criteria, and they're listed up there, but I'll just go into a little bit more detail on each of them. The first one, fitting with the council's regional outcomes, strategic priorities and policies, pretty much speaks to itself. The second one, environmental enhancement, is how the project directly promotes, enhances or protects the Waikato region's environment with a focus on improved ecological and biodiversity outcomes. The third point is around community participation and awareness. So how the project involves iwi Māori, the wider community, and how it increases public awareness of environmental issues, what level of mana whenua and community support there is for the project. The fourth criteria is around collaboration and partnership. So how applicants have explored and developed opportunities for collaboration and partnership with others, and that would include any co-funding or support received from other parties. The fifth criteria is around project viability, so the likelihood of the project's success and the applicant's capability to deliver the outcomes of the project, so what experience they have in delivering those types of things. And the last one is value to mana whenua, so how the project involves iwi Māori, including their cultural values, interests and associations. So the third step in the assessment process is that all the 3 assessor scores are combined, and then it goes to a moderation panel. So the moderation panel was made up of 5 staff plus the external assessor, and they used the combined assessor scores and developed funding recommendations to bring to ICMC. Now, there were 3 sort of principles that the moderation panel kept in mind when they were having their discussions, and those 3 were taking into account, I guess, lessons learned from previous NHF funding rounds and EIF rounds, and in particular, that was, of course, ensuring that the projects with the highest assessor scores were recommended for funding, continuing to support well-established groups that have a proven track record and perhaps have identified critical funding shortfalls that we can support, and also funding the full requested amount where possible so that it increases the potential of project success, because of course if you're only part funding a project would find it very difficult to be successful. Noting that that doesn't mean we would be funding the full amount of the project, just the requested amount from council. Next slide, Jordan. So onto the role of ICMC. The role of ICMC is to review the recommendations that are put forward by council staff, and then either to approve, decline, or adapt those recommendations. Now, there are certain instances where ICMC would need to make a recommendation to full council, and the terms of reference for ICMC require that if any application requests more than 1/3 of the annual plan funding for the NHF. In any one financial year, ICMC are required to make a recommendation to full council. If it's less than 1/3, then that decision can be made by ICMC. Councillors need to declare any conflicts of interest and determine as a group how those will be handled. And of course, staff will be available at the 25 February meeting to answer any questions that the committee might have. Slide. So the final two steps in the decision-making process is that ICMC review those recommendations and make the funding decisions, and if needed, make a recommendation to full council. So when you receive the report with all the information about the NHF round, 2024-25 round, and the applications, we will be providing a summary of each of the applicants, and it will be in a set format table, and that will give you an overview of each of the applicants and include why staff have made the recommendations that they have. Questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I've got a whole lot. I'm trying to write them down and remember them. So first off, what is the cost of the staff to run this? Because it's going through two processes before it even gets to ICM. You've got a panel of 3 and then a panel of 5. What is their cost?
Yep, I've got that information. So the total for this year allocated to the NHF is around 2.25 million. And labour and management costs are taken out of that. So not only the staff labour, but also the management costs, so the overheads, the proportional overheads, keeping the lights on, etc. And that's around about 200,000. So it's about 9% of the allocated funds. Now, if you like a little bit more context around that, when the NHPP review was done in 2023, their labour costs were around 14%. And so through some efficiencies that we have implemented, along with the fact that as the funds grow and you get economies of scale from a labour cost perspective, we've been able to reduce those down to 9%, which is fantastic. Also during that review, other councils were, gave some information on how much it costs to run their fund, and 9% is very low. So we were really happy with that. For example, Waikato District Council, I think it was reported in the report that was done by Financial Business Services that theirs was about 42% of their total fund. Now, of course, that is just for the NHF, so EIF and SCIF would have their own costs associated.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just to follow on from that, you said at the beginning of the presentation that if not all is spent that year, it carries over into next pot. Why wouldn't it all be allocated? Because is it quite often that it's over prescribed, or, you know, what I know I can understand if some was left over when, you know, a certain amount doesn't reach the criteria or doesn't get through those first two processes. Is it like, are you overprescribed with people that have met the criteria? I'm just trying to understand
why it would go into reserve.
Would it go into reserve?
So yes, you're correct. These funds typically now are oversubscribed. However, we of course only want to support projects that, particularly with this large fund, that are very well established, and because you're talking about a much larger amount of money, and that score well against the assessment criteria. So there could be a time when we have applicants that we don't deem to be meeting the criteria to an acceptable level, and even if it was oversubscribed, or if we had money left over, we might choose to recommend that we wouldn't fund them. So that would be one example. And the other example is because the applicants are often asking for large sums of money, if we have a small amount left over and we aren't able to fund that next project, then we might put the small amount into a reserve.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. just
Carry on.
Another one.
No,
So the process where it goes to the first group, 2 staff and the 1
Yep, assessor.
assessor,
Yeah. Mhm.
When it goes to the second group, the 5 staff and the 1 assessor, can they then look at that and say no, that they pick stuff out of that and say no before it comes to ICM?
So what happens
Why is there a second one in there? That's what I'm kind of asking. Would that cut the cost if you cut out those 5 and the 1?
So I guess in terms of staff time, potentially, although bearing in mind it's a 4-hour meeting, the moderation meeting, so you wouldn't significantly change the costs. The 3 assessors are technical experts, and so they go through a very detailed assessment process. The moderation meeting with the panel, I guess, is really to drill down on any nuances in each of the projects. So any concerns that the assessor might have around a project or any questions that they might have, then that would get discussed at that 4-hour moderation meeting. And it's really just to do a double check so that wider than just those 3 people are casting their eyes over those applications and making a determination to recommend to council.
Okay. Sorry, the last part is the projects when you talked about they can apply between 1 and 4-year projects. Is that amount given at the total of the first year of the projects, or do they get money allocated out of each year for the 4 years?
Good question. So when the policy was reviewed in April 2024, we removed the ability for internal borrowing, what we call internal borrowing. So in previous rounds, the full amount available for that year was allocated to year 1 of a project. And what that meant was that that if an applicant was successful in applying for, say, a 3-year project, years 2 and years 3 would come out of future year budgets. And obviously that constrains future decision makers and also means that there was a highly variable amount available each year. So most funders do not do that. And we removed that as part of the policy review so that the full amount was allocated from the budget in the year it was applied. So if you were applying for 300,000, 100,000 each year, then that would, and you were successful, then that would be coming out of this year's budget. However, we only give it to them in the year in which they need it. So we would hold it for the year that they need it. Yeah. And that also means that we ask for a progress report so that we can track how they're going, and if there's any concerns, then those can be dealt with.
Sorry, and just last one. The third, I just couldn't get my head around that. If it's more than a third, is that the third of that annual year's budget then has to go to full council?
That's correct.
just in that would be more for an organisation that's trying to purchase land. If they were trying to take a third of the budget, they would it or not?
Well, there is one very large example that is currently being funded through us. They're not up for, that they still have funding for another 2 years from us, but theirs would exceed, typically what they have applied for would exceed that. Sometimes, yes, it would also be for land purchases.
Yeah. Thank you. Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My questions, I guess, are around probity. We're talking about a lot of money that's being taken off ratepayers. As councillors, we've got a responsibility to make sure that money is used effectively. In horror stories, in fact, expert witnesses and expert witness, police trying to recover monies which are being spent and not in accordance with designated standards. So I guess my questions are around that area. And the first one is, what experience have our group got in terms of governance, internal controls? In 5, you make comments about standard accounting procedures. What are those standard accounting procedures? How are they delivered to the organisation? How are they ensured that those are being followed? and what sort of governance controls are in place. So as part of our approval process, I would like you to explain to me how we cover off probity of safety of the fund.
And when you say governance and finance, are you referring to internally at council, or are you referring to the organisation?
The organisation, because conceptually somebody could get $2 million to be working with. I want to make sure if that happens, that we have ensured that those funds are going to be dispersed in accordance with project outlines and policies.
So anybody that is approved for funding needs to sign a funding deed at the beginning, and attached to that is a very robust budget outline. If it is more than a one-year project, then they provide a progress report annually. And in some cases, we ask for it more than annually, particularly where there are larger sums of money involved. And our staff will then, line by line, go through the expenditure against what was agreed. So that provides that certain, and literally they've had to provide receipts, etc., so that we can be sure that the money has been spent as it was intended. Obviously, in terms of our criteria when we're assessing, one very important criteria is around viability, and that incorporates not only the financial viability of the project that they're undertaking, but also the financial viability of the organisation. So we check, they have to be a legal entity, and many of these groups we've been working with for years, but of course we need to ensure that they have good governance, which is a requirement of most organisations that are set up as a trust, which many of them are. We as staff attend their AGMs, so we have a lot of operational processes in place, and we meet with them regularly because often they will be asking for technical expertise. So for example, we would sit on technical advisory groups. We, particularly with the NHF, we are working very closely in partnership with them at every step of the way and at every level, whether it's governance, strategic or technical advice.
I guess the big issue for me is internal control. That there is separated most of these, to get, and I'm not worried about the small funds. I'm only worried about the high level disbursement of funds. And I'd like to know more about what policies, standard accounting policies, are being applied to those organisations, and that we have got an ability to either internally or externally to verify that those policies are being followed. Internal controls, like if you put one person in charge of the bank account, then all sorts of things can happen, I can assure you. And I want to make sure that this is not, that our funds are not exposed to that sort of activity.
I guess what I can try and provide to you is a little bit more around the charitable trust procedures, which we require them to follow. But for example, they have to, as part of their AGM, I understand, have audited reports every year.
We'll just move over.
No, you're right.
Sorry to speak to that. I guess so. Most of the groups that we work with are operate as large charitable trusts, which have pretty strict auditing processes as well. So, whilst we might not necessarily dictate what accounting processes the group themselves have to have, we do often get given, we get these audited reports as well to be able to verify that.
That gives me more comfort, thank you. So there is do we have a certain level over which we insist that they provide audited financial statements or not?
I'm not too sure, but I think that the charitable trusts require audits.
They've got three categories.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not. Yeah, because of the scale that these groups are operating at, I think my understanding is that they ought to all have audited reports. That's my experience.
Thank you.
Cool. And just one other point is that internally, all the delegations that are set come into play as well. So, you know, these guys actually don't sign any of these things off because it's way above their delegation. In fact, most of them are above mine and some of them above Greg's as well. So we've got, you know, all those funding agreements are signed off at the appropriate level as well.
I'd just like to add to that the one or two I'd believe that the major groups you're talking about, Chris, that I've met, they are quite professional organisations, and I think maybe to give you comfort, when next time we're doing a visit to one of them, you should come on the journey and have a talk with, because they're very professional organisation. The ones I've met are very professional organisations, so I think your questions are valid, and maybe meeting some of these groups would actually help you and feel a bit more comfortable in that place as well. Meeting like Louise Saunders and others that are out there that are CEOs of these organisations, I think would help you with your and comfort in that space. I think that's a good wording for it. Yeah. Warren, have you got a next question, and then we'll go to Bruce.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Thanks, Robbie. The NHF has no formal application process. Can you give me a little bit of an outline then how people come to you, how they find you, etc.?
So in the past, there's been no formal application process. It was run as a discretionary fund, which means that organisations would approach council and we would work with them. However, with the increase in the funding and with the increase in applicants, on the 19th of September when we came to council, we provided advice that it would be run as a contestable fund in this instance, and potentially in future instances, although that will be up for consideration. So there has been a formal application process. There was an opening and a closing date. It was open for 4 weeks, and we had a very formal application which they had to complete.
Thank you. With the report that will come back to us, do we see the scaling of those 6 conditions that the staff actually look at, or the panel?
The eligibility criteria. It is a very detailed document. It has sub-questions under each of them and a rating. So we wouldn't typically provide that to you because it would be a lot of information. However, we can provide information around the final combined scoring if that's something that councillors would like.
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah. Yeah, it's probably something, and the background to my question is just around some of the social and cultural outcomes, understanding that obviously the conservation has a great value for that, but I just wonder how easy that is for some of these groups to actually monitor and then show outcomes for that social and cultural piece of it. So yeah, I've got some queries around that, but and then my probably last question is there, we're starting to see more in the hub type scenario, and is that something that there's the ability for the NHF to fund going forward?
Yes, absolutely. And I briefly mentioned that. So the priority for 24 to 27 is twofold. It's for projects that achieve landscape scale outcomes, which speaks for itself, or link multiple smaller biodiversity projects to achieve landscape scale biodiversity outcomes. And the hub concept would fall under that, where they are supporting a large number of groups. We had a definition as part of that pre-eligibility criteria for landscape scale, and one of those definitions allowed for the hub approach.
Yeah, because I think it's ideal for closing those corridors between some of those projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that allows that more for catchment, total catchment biodiversity than just specific areas. So that hub ideas, I quite like. I like that idea. But anyway, Bruce, your questions.
I just wanted to pick up on the point you made, Mr. Chair, about the nature of these organisations. We've had a good number of them come in and present to us, so we should know who some of these people are. All of us, we know that. And I just want to talk about the governance, because Chris asked some questions about governance. And so, I mean, basically those bigger groups that have, all of the ones that have come in to visit us have very serious governance arrangements. You know, these trusts, they're major operations. And you made the point about their professionalism. So on at least 3 of the big ones, for example, as part of governance, in one of them there's a BNZ banker, not pushing the particular bank, but the point is the financial expertise is often contained within the trust membership, the trustees, and they select their trustees often to get that range of professional input. So they have bankers. I'm thinking of the ones that I've worked with in the past and the ones I'm aware of who've come in to visit us. They have many major business leaders in the Waikato are involved in these trusts. They're actually in amongst them and are providing the sort of governance that is required to make sure they stay on the straight and narrow. So I think, Chris, you would be comforted to know if you saw the lineup of people on some of these trusts that they do have the relevant expertise. That was the main point. I just wanted to support your comment about professionalism. These big ones are seriously professional.
And they're after a lot of corporate money as well now, so they are behaviour is not the right word, but they are very professional in their organisation, and the way their organisation works is very, it might be a trust, but it is a business, and they're after every corporate dollar they can find. So
No, I agree with all that, but also I agree that we still need a reasonably robust process to go through, because it only takes one individual to pull a Swifty, and yeah.
we all support what Chris says, but I think for Chris needs to most probably, as I said, come on the journey with us and understand who these organisations are, and seeing how they work, and come along to some of the invites where we get to see some of these organisations and how they behave, so and how they work. So, Noel.
Thank you. Just picking up on something that Ron raised, I think on page 11 is the example project summary template. So the staff recommendation is what I want to hone in on. You offered to include a summary of the technical stuff, and I don't want to see pages of the 6 technical analysis and whatever, but how would a recommendation normally be couched, and would that technical information be summarised so in a useful layman's way to understand how the group got to that, rather than just say we agree with this, support up to X, Y, Z. I'm not sure that I can remember any of the previous examples. So can you just help me and understand fully what's going to be in that staff recommendation and pulling from that technical analysis?
Yes, we've thought long and hard about the information that we provide, because we want to provide enough that you can make an informed decision, but not overwhelm with a lot of technical information. So the project each applicant, it's on one page, so that that template is one page. There'll be a paragraph around the organisation that's applying, who they are. There'll be a paragraph around the project summary, so what the project is trying to do in non-technical terms. There will be some bullet points around what the project is going to achieve, and what bullet points around how they're going to achieve them in terms of what activities they're going to undertake. And then there will be a paragraph with the staff recommendation outlining why they think it is a project that should be considered for funding, or why it is a project that at this stage should not be considered for funding. So, and then of course we will also be here so that if councillors would like further detail, we have a lot of background information that we can provide because, of course, we've run a very robust process internally.
Initially in public excluded, or will it be an open meeting because of the nature of the organisation's material? It's open, okay. And so if we wanted to drill down, like if it was said that staff's recommendation is we turn this down, will there be sufficient detail in the report? Will we need, if we wanted to drill down deeper and you found it uncomfortable to disclose, how we're going to deal with that?
I don't think we'll find it uncomfortable to disclose because
Okay.
it is a very clear assessment process, and we will have good reasons for recommending to decline it. And we we work out in the community all the time. So even if we are recommending to decline, that doesn't mean that we're not working with the organisation to provide technical or other expertise.
No, that's good. I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Jen, do you want a question, or as we're going around to the second round? Okay, cool. Mike,
Well, just to follow on from Councillor Marr and a little bit on Councillor Noel over there.
Yeah, Warren's good too.
My thing is that because it's a targeted rate and, you know, it's kind of gone up quite significantly and, you know, justified. What future prospects of making it more community aware? Like, you know, I've been a councillor down in Taupō and a regional ratepayer for, you know, 35 years and never knew of it until now, becoming a regional council. And it's, you know, to me, it's the core responsibility of what regional rates about when you go back to environment. Waikato, that's the original name, and I still think of, you know, regional council as environment because it's about environment. You know, and my question is how can we get it out to the ratepayers, the regional ratepayers, to know that this is something that's really, really great, getting down to the core business of what we're about. And because you've got communities out there that are like community-led, that are doing these good things, but probably don't know about this funding, because I didn't know about it, you know, and I'm involved with a lot of groups down Taupō. I kind of also greening Taupō because I know they, you know, are quite big ones. And then as Bruce said, you know, we've had presentations coming in, so I've kind of got to know that. So going forward now, the fund has got that justifiably, even though I voted against it, justifiably got bigger. What procedures have we got going forward to make it more open to the region?
So that's a really good question, and it is something that we've been working really hard on over the course of last year and will continue to do so, about informing and good comms around it to the wider community. We've already started doing lots of things. So for example, we produced the video, which many of you will have seen, which we have been getting out on all our social media as well as through our own channels. There is the Waikato Biodiversity Forum, which is a non-government entity that we're very supportive of and involved with, and in fact provide a whole range of support to. And they are very connected to all the community groups that are working in the biodiversity space, and we provide regular comms to them. So we're using a whole range of different communication channels. We produce newsletters twice annually now, which ahead of rounds we will talk about them. We put a lot on our social media. We're updating our website at the moment, so that information is there. And we're developing, in conjunction with our comms team, a platform which will enable people to interact with us. So there's lots of things happening, and agree that that's something that we need to ensure that people are aware of.
I'd just like to add,
Can you
We
use
need
your
to
mic?
quickly-
Just,
Push the button there.
Eddie,
Yep, there you go.
we've got people online, that's all.
Councillor, I'd just like to add, there are staff around the region working with a lot of these groups as well, and we have staff working on other biodiversity projects down in the Taupo region, and we've also made them aware that this fund is out there as well.
Just to add into that, myself and Warren were at the Waihi Gold Mine presentation the other day, and Haraki Iwi came up to us and they want to definitely be in. They want to have a go at restoration around the Kaipua Peat Dome, so they're after funding for that next year. So there's a group that you need to get out and visit and educate how to put a funding policy towards getting. They're definitely in that space and they're after. So they spoke to us for a good 40 minutes, wouldn't it, Warren? About it. And they've already done the biodiversity of the new plantings that would be required around. So they've done the assessment of what is going to be, how the dome has shrunk and what is, and what is now the best plantings to put in the suit. So they've already done all those assessments. So there is another large group that's going to come online, and that is Spransar site. So I'd imagine it's an important one for the future. So I just put it out there, what Mike is saying there, and they came to us going, how do we apply for funding? And that lady also is involved with DOC. So you remember her name, Warren?
No.
No, but she's on our Hauraki Flood Protection Committee on behalf of DOC. I can't, sorry, but she's from the Mariah Turahia. So yeah, there's a one definitely to reach out to. She's I asked her to talk to Emily to try and move that forward. So yeah, good question there, Mike. I totally support that. Warren.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of quick ones. Just confirming just what Noel touched on. So we will see all successful and unsuccessful applications and they come back to us in that report.
Yes.
Yep. And secondly, just I have concerns around sort of groups being stranded. And so in the viability clause, you've got their criteria, you've got there under number 5. Do we look at their ability to carry on the projects if they don't receive any more funding for us further down the track?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay, no, that solves that. Thank you. Well, like a gallery, things like that, they've really, the mountain, they've really come to rely on funding, and as if other sources dry up, and we actually look at that. Once you've had your fund, you've got to lay off for a year, then that stranding of all of a sudden they can't keep up the good work. By stranded, I mean. Yeah.
Chris, you.
I'm just interested in terms of how the fund's allocated by region. It's a targeted rate. I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, that Hamilton City contributes the most significant portion to that. So as a Hamilton City ratepayer, I would like to think that we receive our representative portion spent within the city boundary. So can you just explain how it works, please?
So that's something that's important to many people and has been raised a number of times. And yes, we do look at it at a sub-regional approach and try to get an even distribution with the NHF, because it tends to be large scale projects that is often more difficult than with some of the other funds, for example, the Environmental Initiatives Fund and the Small Scale Community Initiatives Fund. In terms of specifically speaking to Hamilton City, there is another program that has been around for many years called the Hamilton Halo Project, and that was designed to address that very thing. It's not funded out of that targeted rate, but it is for the benefit of Hamilton City residents, and happy to provide more information on that if you'd like it, but it's outside the scope of the Natural Heritage Partnership Program.
I guess what I guess, well, I think you should be putting your rates up, Mr. Coromandel councillor. Yeah, I just like as a targeted rate targeted rate, I'd like to think that we're tracking where the money is going, and and maybe this Halo fund should be, as you suggest, maybe it should be part of it, so that Hamilton City ratepayers are getting their representative share of that rate money collected. So yeah.
I understand where you're going with it, Chris, but there is places in the Waikato and out in the regions that do benefit for everybody. And I'm not trying to, you're dead right what you're saying, but all I hope is Hamilton then sees the benefit of that biodiversity or that sanctuary where that wildlife is flourishing, like out at Raglan and up the Coromandel, that can't take place in Hamilton. I think that's the bit we got to sell better to Hamilton as well, that these things are happening. Does it make sense? I think that's the seller, that you contribute to these great other things in the region, and that's where you know. But he is right. But we've got to sell that to Hamilton. Tim, show it. That's the question. So, Stu, you were next. Sorry for babbling on.
Yeah, look, I'm on the same page as Robbie. The minute, and I'm not saying we shouldn't keep a weather eye on what's going where, but the minute we start saying Hamilton's contributing 10 grand, or that 10 grand's got to go into Hamilton, we might as well not even bother having a regional council. And it swings and roundabouts. I think of the velodrome, and I had to try and sell to my constituents in the King Country that it was worth contributing to a velodrome. That's all it's going to be in bloody Cambridge, effectively Hamilton as well. What's the point? Well, clearly Pew is not the right place to put a bloody velodrome. So it had to come here, but it had to be funded regionally. And equally, there's going to be opportunities to enhance biodiversity in, got the name of the range that runs down the west coast now, and the Coromandel and all those sort of places, you know. And look, Coromandel's seen a significantly big share of this, but and look, I've worked really hard to try and promote it down the King Country as well, and we haven't had that much buy-in. And I think it largely reflects the fact there's a lot of people, a lot of retired people in the Coromandel that want to volunteer their labour to do all this sort of stuff, you know. And it's no point putting money if there's no one to help you spend that money, eh? So it's always swings and roundabouts, and I'm not saying that I do think it is a little bit biased towards the Coromandel, but that's the reality of what we've had to deal with, and I'm always trying to get more into the King Country, but I've not a lot of luck in getting people to instigate projects. So at the end of the day, I'm really supportive with how we allocate it, you know.
And also, you know, Lake Taupo, you know, the nitrogen, you know, all the whole region, and, you know, the jewel of the crown. So that's
Bruce.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much, but yeah, it's the regional benefit. Everybody benefits. It's not just, the benefit doesn't just lie with one part of the region. And I must say, though, that when we voted on the $15 per ratepayer for Natural Heritage Fund, of course, I canvassed my constituency, and my constituency is fully aware of what's going on here and are happy to put their money in projects in Coromandel, Taupo, Herangi Range, West Coast, Kaimai, wherever the issue is. They are fully supportive of it. And I think we need to remember that, is that they're not just focused on what they can get for their own backyard at all. They are viewing biodiversity as a regional scale project, but they also, of course, they want to travel and visit the best biodiversity locations in the region. They're the people of Hamilton City are the ones who travel to the Kaimai and roam the Kaimai. I see many of my neighbours on the Kaimai Range at the weekend. They're out there. They're not sitting in the park here in Hamilton. So they are all getting the benefit, and they are fully supportive of the decision that we made.
Thanks there, Bruce. Yeah. There is a happy medium place in the middle with the education to get Hamilton, you know, the rest of Hamilton, to understand where that money is allocated and how it I'm going on. Noel.
Look, for me, I go back when I took over the farm, it's over 40 years ago. Hakramatas are about 2 kilometres across the Waipa River from me. I've got about 10 acres of native bush across the road on the marae grounds. But I never saw any of these native birds. And over the years, we've got the hakramatas and we've got the coromandels and the likes. But the individual landowners are doing things. But we've got these community organisations that are filling a gap. And I think it's the combination of all. It's what we've got there that the large blocks that we've got to protect and support. We've got the individual landowners, which are the other funds we can help support. But it's these groups that do the linkages and the hub that you talked about earlier, Warren, I think it was. So it's just part of the big picture. And now, not only seeing tui all through the year, we've started to see Kuru practically throughout the year with the different plantings that I've done. So, we all as individuals, but as groups, we make up the big picture. And I think that's what we've got to think. The end goal here is that big picture outcome from all the contributions. So, yeah, I don't know whether that was a sermon or not, but yeah, anyway, leave it at that.
Thanks, Tom. Gina.
Quick question was, you mentioned you try and take a sub-regional view, and I was wondering if you could just define that, because I certainly see from what was been mentioned, the sense of not sticking to territorial authority boundaries, because it doesn't make sense. And I'm comfortable because it's a flat rate, everybody pays the same. But when you say sub-regional, what do you mean by that? I anticipate it's kind of Waipa and below as like a sub-region, and then maybe the future Prairie is a sub-region. I just wonder what you think, how you divvy it up.
So
Try and make it balance a little bit.
what we do is we assess each application on its merits, and then we come up with our recommendations, but then we map it to see how it looks. And I guess it was to others' points that it isn't the defining way that we recommend or other, but it is something that we keep an eye on, and we're aware that we are striking a balance between ensuring that all of the sub-regions, so all the different areas of the Waikato have the opportunity to access these funds where they have good projects, but also understanding that we can't always give the money out evenly. And what I would say is that we are much more cognizant of that for our smaller funds where that is easier to do.
Yeah, I totally get that.
For the larger projects and funds, that is less so.
Yeah, because the biodiversity is where it is.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Totally, yeah. So you haven't got a strict definition for it, but you're just looking at a map. Cool, thanks.
Could I ask the question about educational institutions or what they would be applying for? Now, because one question I've had from out when you're talking in the region is educational outcomes are really hard to measure in this space. So should it be in a different funding policy or not? That's why I'm asking the question, if that makes any sense.
Yep, it absolutely does. We don't exclude educational institutes from applying, and the reason for that is that, for example, if there was an educational institution that was wanting to undertake a biodiversity related project and they were the lead, then we would want to be able to consider that. But typically, if it's a school, that would go through our Enviro Schools program. The other thing to note is that many of these large organisations that we have supported through the NHF in the past run a very multi-pronged project. So whilst they might be planting, pest animal, pest plant control, all those protecting species through a whole range of activities, often a big emphasis for them alongside that is educating their local communities for the very reasons that have been discussed today. And they often run some quite significant educational projects, some of which some of you will have seen through the likes of Karioi, and there are many, many others across the region that are doing that, and that is a component of their overall project.
Okay, thank you. Questions? go now to Catchment.
Yeah.
So everyone's comfortable with the discussion that's happened so far? Something to say, Pedro?
Oh, just like, look, really good discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And if you've got any further questions, either before you get the pack for the 25th or as you leave the meeting and you've just got other thoughts, just chuck us an email and we'll do our best to provide some information, whatever information we can.
Patrick, there's a lot going on at the moment, so when are we going to get the pack? Because, you know, we've got to give it proper consideration, as you can appreciate. So when are we getting them?
So we're going to try and get it to you as early as possible. So in
No.
advance of the 7 days of normal.
More than 7 days?
Yeah, we're doing our best to do that. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. So I think we've had a good roundtable discussion. So I appreciate everybody that's involved themselves in the discussion day and the questions. And thanks very much. I'll make the meeting closed. Thank you.